Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
That was former President Reagan speaking in Berlin. A lot of people have been celebrating Ronald Reagan this month. He would have been 100 years old last week, so people are remembering his great moments, like saying, tear down this wall, saying it to the leader of the communist empire. Reagan's also being celebrated for reining in the growth of government. Well, he had the sentiment right. He said, we who live in free market societies believe that growth, prosperity, and ultimately human fulfillment are created from the bottom up, not the government down. That's the spontaneous order we were just talking about, and Reagan apparently read Hayek, who popularized the phrase spontaneous order. In that same speech, President Reagan went on to say, only when the human spirit is allowed to invent and create, only then can societies remain economically alive and free. Trust the people. Trust the people. Usually politicians say, trust me. We politicians will lead you people, and we need a lot of your money to do that. Here's a graph of the growth of government since the beginning of America. For most of our history, government didn't spend that much, maybe less than 5% of GDP. The spending starts to rise in the 30s under Roosevelt, and it's risen sharply ever since. This is adjusted for inflation. Reagan ran for office and said government was the problem. He promised to cut its growth, and he did slow it down a little at the beginning of his administration. But then, as usual, government grew. Here's this graph again, and the graph of Reagan's term. He may be known as the anti-government guy, but government grew by billions during his term. Republicans always say they'll slow government growth, but Reagan didn't. Bush Sr. didn't. Bush Jr. sure didn't. So why aren't Republicans the party of free markets and limited government? Why is it that even a president who said government is the problem couldn't cut it? Why couldn't he? Why? What's the problem? The man I'm asking is President Reagan's former budget director, David Stockman. So,
well, I think
do it.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. It was a fine sentiment. Big government stayed big and got bigger, and it wasn't just because of defense. Defense was 5.5% of GDP in the 70s and 80s. It was 5.5% of GDP when he left. Now, that's the first point. The second point is we talked about shrinking major functions of government, shrinking the welfare state, if you will. None of this happened.
So why? I mean, at the beginning, you proposed some cuts, 83 programs you were going to cut.
Yeah, and we cut a few of them partially, and after a few years, when the pressure came off and the political strength of the White House had been diminished, those programs were gradually rebuilt. I can remember one well, the Education Department. All Republicans were agreed in 1980 eliminate Jimmy Carter's $15 billion Education Department. Today it's $90 billion, and it was enormously expanded during Bush Jr., during the 8 years of the Bush administration.
All right, well, his heart wasn't in it. I
Yes.
assume your heart was in it. You couldn't do it. So why? Are you saying it's impossible? The interests are just too strong? We're
Yes.
toast?
It's unfortunately, it's the congressional committee and subcommittee system. It's the interest group lobbying system. It's the philosophy that it's okay to steal money from the taxpayers of Texas in order to fund Amtrak routes between Philadelphia and Boston, and as a result, as long as we have that kind of philosophy, you really can't shrink this huge envelope of government that has continued to expand.
I mean, so what are you saying? I mean, I tried, and my president was President Ronald Reagan, and we couldn't do it, so forget about it?
Well, I think you can never stop trying, but you also have to recognize the facts. And after 30 years of referendum, really, on spending in every dimension, every program, the Republicans have not stepped up to the plate. In fact, they've been at bat year after year and whiffed time after time. They wouldn't touch Social Security. Medicare, they expanded with the Part D drug benefit. So I think we have a verdict that's in, and that is the American people seem to want most of this government. And if they do, then the politicians have to level with them and say, you've got to pay the taxes in order to fund the government you want. You've got to eat your spinach if you're going to have all these good things. And if politicians start telling the public about big tax increases, maybe the public would begin to rethink what they want from government. But as long as we have this deficits don't matter, we're never going to approach the core issue.
All right, so let's break that down. You wrote a book about this subtitled Why the Reagan Revolution Failed, and you blame your fellow Republicans, big tax cutters, for the supply side argument, for saying, cut the taxes, the economy will grow so much, we don't really have to worry so much about the spending. As it turned out, we do have to worry about the spending.
Exactly.
Spending's the big problem. Maybe the Tea Party will win if they really believe in cutting spending,
well,
which
they have
I'm
to be
skeptical about.
I think they believe it. I think maybe they don't know how vicious the interest group lobbying force is. I don't think they've been...
What makes it vicious? Why?
Because they really come in and threaten people. You know, they flood you with mail. They threaten to support your opponent in the primary or the general election, to raise all the money imaginable to make sure that you don't make the mistake of voting against the cotton lobby another time. One of the great economists, Schumpeter, that Reagan actually read too, one of the ideas was creative destruction. As technologies, new technologies arise and old ones fade, businesses go out, you know, businesses fail. Capital is reallocated. Workers are reallocated.
So let's welcome back creative destruction. Let's not talk in the past tense about it. That's the spontaneous order. Thank you, David Stockman.
Coming up next, we look at a part of America that has very little spontaneous order and the nasty things that does to people.
This rock has never stood still. Since our...
Why is this woman crying? Because she's just been sentenced to jail. Why was she put in jail?
Because she wanted to choose her kids' public school. Well, you find it hard to believe she'd be jailed for that, but that did happen. That woman, Kelly Williams Bowler, lives in part of Akron, Ohio that's not so safe. Her father lives in a safer part of town, said to have better schools. So Kelly enrolled her daughters in schools in his neighborhood and told school officials that the kids lived at her dad's address. And they do. Sometimes they spend a lot of time with their grandfather because his neighborhood's safer.
Grandparents are usually allowed to watch the children if something is wrong. And I'm a grandparent. I just felt that we did the right thing.
Her town did not think that was the right thing. Here's a report from our affiliate in Cleveland.
The district hired a private investigator who shot this video of the kids waiting for a bus near their grandfather's house, along with their mother, Kelly Williams Bowler. They also followed her to her house in Akron, believing she lied to the district about where the kids live. Williams Bowler told the court there was no intent to deceive the district, but the superintendent believes the case cost them $30,000.
Those dollars need to stay home with our students.
This judge sentenced her to 10 days in jail.
I felt that some punishment or deterrent was needed for other individuals who might think to defraud the various school systems.
The judge sent her to jail for defrauding the system. But my next guest calls her the new Rosa Parks. Kevin Chavis is chairman of Democrats for Education Reform. Rosa Parks?
Well, I tell you, John, I haven't seen anything like it. How many of us know someone who has used the wrong address or someone else's address to get their kids in a better school? I mean, it's outrageous that they would spend the resources and energy and time, hired a private investigator to look at this woman and find out what she's doing when she wants her kids in a better school. That's exactly what happened to Rosa Parks. She fought an unjust law. It was morally right for her to do so, and that's what Kelly Williams did.
She fought segregation by refusing to move to the back of the bus.
Yeah, well, this is a new form of civil rights abuse. The fact that we aren't educating the lion's share of American school children in the way we should. And this woman who knows her children in a bad school, she's in an unsafe neighborhood, she has to send them to another school district to get a good education. Is that where we are?
Well, yeah, it's where we are. And rich people can move to the good neighborhood.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm thinking about Brian Boitano and this spontaneous order. You see what the government resources did. They got together like you and Brian did, and they conspired on how to stop this.
Telling people, you go here, you go there.
And we hire an investigator. We're going to set an example. You're defrauding the system. Why not allow her to pick the school that works for her kids so then the system will work in the way it should?
Attach the money to the student, and they're spending in America $11,000 per student. Let them go to any school. Schools would be eager to take those kids.
Well, I know, but that's too much like right. I mean, the bottom line in this country, we've allowed ourselves to be over-systematized so that everything has to report to a certain office. You have to have several people check off a box. That's the only way it works. But we know, as she indicated, it doesn't work for too many American families.
Now, she said, she was asked about this, I'm not Rosa Parks, I'm just a mom looking out for her kids.
Well, that's the beauty of it. She wasn't, you could see by the tape, this woman was devastated at the thought that she was going to go to jail. She has a felony conviction, 9 days in jail. Her future as a teacher, she was going to school to become a teacher, is in jeopardy, all because she really wanted to get her kids in a better neighborhood and a better school. And then the system comes down on her and they get together and say, you need to do it like this, go over there, put this widget in that box. You know, that's just not right. It really says more about who we are as a people, as a community, to allow this to happen. You know, there was a judge in Missouri that handled it differently for a lot of kids who come from a failing St. Louis school district. He ordered earlier in the year that that failing school district needs to pay for those kids to go to a neighboring school district. I mean, why don't we do that as opposed to locking someone up?
And this hiring of private investigators to track her. I mean, I think of competition in the free market. I can't imagine McDonald's using detectives to try to keep people from going to McDonald's.
Yeah, you know, John, I love to hate bureaucracies. They can't help themselves. They will stumble all of themselves to keep you in line, to make sure that you adhere to this one-size-fits-all notion of how you educate children, where they go to school, how they do it. And it doesn't matter if the kids aren't learning. It doesn't matter if the environment isn't safe. It doesn't matter if it even doesn't make sense. They're going to make you be restricted in where you go, and then they're going to put all the weight of the government resources behind this idea of keeping you in line.
And you're with Democrats for school choice.
Well,
I thought Democrats were against school choice.
Well, I think more and more, you know, there's this notion that the people will lead the leaders. And I think over time, the Democratic Party has made a big mistake of allowing the vested interests in the bureaucracy, namely the unions, dictate how we feel about education and how we feel about schooling. Yeah, I think Democrats need to fall in line and our leaders need to fall in line. Now you've got to find a way to make sure that you tailor your educational options in the best way for individual children, not a system. Remember, the system was supposed to serve us, not the other way around. This is an example where it went awry.
Thank you, Kevin Chavis. We asked the school superintendent and prosecutor to join us here, but they told us they were not available. Coming up, you've seen what happens when government centrally plans education. What happens when they try to plan health care? Governors, including our next guest, Governor Mitch Daniels, say, we're going to fight that central planning. And he has a plan.